I'm officially 2 weeks into my endeavors in learning Classical Nahuatl. Now, unfortunately, this past week has been really busy for me, so I haven't had time to do anywhere near as much as I would have liked. As I mentioned last time, I have been studying primarily by going through this book. At this stage, it is very difficult, for a number of reasons. Obviously, at this point, I don't have very much vocabulary under my belt, but even beyond that, as I mentioned in, I think it was my last one, I'm not going about studying this language the way I'd normally study a language. Normally, I prefer an input-based approach with an emphasis on learning new vocabulary, and I only really bother to study grammar intentionally if there's a particular pattern that I keep getting stuck on. If there's something that I fumble on over and over again, then I will go to a reference grammar and look it up, and then that will elucidate things. However, because of the constraints of the availability of materials for Classical Nahuatl, I'm sort of forced into taking a more direct grammar-based approach, which is no problem for me because I find the grammar so interesting anyway. I'm already motivated in that sense. So mainly the first couple of lessons in this book are focused on going through all the various verbal prefixes and possessive prefixes, which there aren't very many. There's, I think, 21 in total, plus some additional, directional prefixes, indirect object prefixes, things like that, things that I'm already quite familiar with. So memorizing the prefixes and what they mean isn't that hard necessarily, so if I go through a text word by word, it's easy enough to pick out the root, then look up the root in a dictionary, and then figure out what all the prefixes mean in reference to it, and then figure out the meaning of the word altogether. That's not especially difficult. Sometimes there's some difficulty with certain vowels will elide, and it's kind of hard to tell whether the vowel belongs to the root or the prefix, things like that, but that's really typical of any language. But the part that I'm finding especially difficult at this point is figuring out the meaning of the word in the context of the meaning of the entire sentence, because for one thing, Classical Nahuatl has a pretty free and flexible word order, so that's no help, and in addition to that, there's no case marking of any kind, and a lot of times it's kind of ambiguous as to which one is the subject and which one is the object, because there's no system of obviation or any other method of disentangling two third-person arguments as either being the subject or object. So a lot of times it's just down to context, and going through some of the examples and some of the little exercises that they have, it's quite difficult, I find, to make a coherent meaning out of what they give you, especially the fact that one of the big things about Nahuatl that I found really cool is every noun is also a verb that means to be that noun. So, just off the top of my head, a noun like masewali is a commoner, but that word masewali also is a verb that means to be a commoner, or it can just be translated as it is a commoner. He, she, or it is a commoner. And so, figuring out whether it's interpreted as a noun or a verb in a sentence is kind of tricky. You have to see if there's any other ones that could be interpreted in the same way, and which one is, serving as the head of the predicate. So from here, I don't really have very much to do other than just keep plodding on with this. Hopefully I can get a lot more done in the next week, and we'll see how it goes from here. So I will see you in week 3. Thanks very much for watching.